All right. Hello. My name's Matt Davis. I'm here with Robert Holden, who, among other things, is a biologist, an ecologist, a life coach, and maybe most pertinently or most importantly right now, a man who has been infected with what we suspect is coronavirus, but there's not actually enough tests to confirm that. But Robert's going to talk to us about what's going on with him. So, hello, Robert.
Hey, man.
um, so, why don't you walk us through the timeline progression of your symptoms and things like that, and just give us an idea of what has been going on for you?
Cool. I'm smiling because I think I'm on the other side of it. Yeah, I first had symptoms last Wednesday, and I first had a dry cough, and I've actually been in my house ever since. And yeah, it sort of came and went for a little while. Really,
Monday today, so that was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 6 days or 13 days?
I guess 13. Yeah, last Wednesday, the 4th. Yeah, it's now the 16th.
Sure.
Wow, that's a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that night I had a dry cough, and I think just it pretty much progressed until Saturday night, and since then I've felt a little bit better each day. Yeah, so that day I had a dry cough in the evening, and then the next day it kind of went away. Like I had a very slight one in the morning, but other than that, it kind of went away. And for a few days it came and went. Like I'd have one day where I thought I was sick and one day where I thought I wasn't. And a couple of times in there I got like hit with really sudden fatigue where all I could really do was like lie down and fall asleep for half an hour. Then it kind of cleared up, and I think for 2 days I thought like, oh, I'm fine, whatever that was is gone. And then it came back and hit me really hard. And yeah, so on Saturday was the first time I ate in 5 days, Saturday night. So those 5 days before that, it was really bad. And actually really different to anything else I've ever had. I heard some people saying they had something in January, which was like a weird flu, and were wondering if they got it. I also got that weird flu, and it was a weird flu, but this thing's totally different. I've never had anything like this. And generally, I really feel my body just fighting something.
And when's the last time you've been sick otherwise? Like what's it usually like when you get sick?
I actually often get colds. Like if there's a cold or a flu going around, I often get it, and probably get it kind of bad compared to most people. I don't know why that is. And I think part of the reason is I often just ignore it. Like I plow on until it gets real bad, and I should have like rested.
Okay, so do you have an idea of when you were infected and when you started showing symptoms?
Yeah, so I've been following coronavirus since January, and like looking at the data, I could see where this was going. So that week before I got sick, I was actually like not really going out, distancing myself and washing my hands a lot and disinfecting my door. But then on Sunday, I went to this community house that I know, and on Monday, I let one of them into my house for an hour who thought he had a cold, and I'm pretty sure he gave me it. And I kind of let him in. Like I asked him his symptoms, and he said he had a runny nose and at that point, I thought that wasn't a symptom of coronavirus. Apparently, it's a symptom in about 4% of the cases.
1 in 25.
Yeah, almost. And yeah, he was in my apartment for like an hour, and I stayed like 2 meters away from him. I disinfected the door when he left. Like, we didn't touch, we didn't get close.
Yeah. So when some people say social distancing, it's like not going to unnecessary events, but then if you are at one, like don't handshake, try to keep your distance. The CDC says 6 feet, which obviously we won't go into how accurate the CDC is about things, but you kind of did the thing to minimize risk and still got it, right?
Right. And it could have been from going to the house itself, because everybody there basically got sick. So I was also there the night before, and that was before I knew anybody was sick. And I guess I had closer contact with people, and like might have touched surfaces. So it could also have been from that.
Okay, so like in there, were you handshaking, hugging, touching?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I think.
Yeah, so we cannot be sure of the discipline you exhibited that evening, right?
Yeah.
So you were like vigilant, but not studious or diligent, right?
Yeah, I'd been like trying to distance myself in general, and that night didn't. Yeah, I definitely hooked someone going in. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about the symptoms? Like what was it like?
Yeah, when it so the things that I got, like, it started with a dry cough, and then I started to get sudden fatigue, and then I just, after 2 days of feeling fine with no symptoms, I woke up just feeling terrible and didn't want to get out of bed, like really lethargic. And then I kind of had, I didn't eat for 5 days almost. Like, probably ate 2 bananas and 2 carrots until I had a bowl of rice. And then for the last 3 days, I've had a bowl of rice. And so I completely lost my appetite. I'd actually eat half a carrot and my body would just be like, do not continue. And I had fatigue, and then I was getting extreme chills. I'm actually someone that I sleep with my window wide open even in the winter, and I closed my window, which is unusual, and I started wearing clothes in bed. Like, at one point I was wearing a woolen top, a woolen sweater, and a woolen sweater over that in bed with my window closed, which is really, really extreme for me. And normally I'm naked in bed. And then I had the chills, and then I could feel all of my lymph nodes, like, everywhere, being painful. I had like muscle aches, I had real pain in my lymph nodes. And then a little bit after that, I had pain in my kidneys, or like real ache, and that's worse when I stand.
So do you know, like, what's going on there with the lymphs and the kidneys? Is it your body's filtering out or removing?
Yeah, so when you have an infection, your body at first like fights it locally. So wherever that infection is present, it fights it. Which for coronaviruses, it infects your lungs. And then your lymph system gets activated, and that's where you produce white blood cells. And then the lymph system is producing white blood cells and fighting the infection in your lymph. And the lymph is like, when you cut yourself and your wound weeps, that like clear liquid, that's your lymph, that's from your lymph system. And then a further stage is if you have ache in your kidneys, it's because your kidneys are filtering the virus out of your blood, which is like it's more widespread. And actually, on the back end of this, my lymph system feels like it's not aching. It actually ached this morning when I woke up, but yesterday it didn't ache at all. But I still have the ache in my kidneys. And also, all through this, I've had a tightness in my chest, like for really bad 5 days, and like a burning feeling in my heart. And actually, my heart just it feels like it's straining, and like walking around hurts. Yeah, this like weird tight burning sensation.
Any idea what that is?
I looked up yesterday about the heart and coronavirus, and it said it could actually infect your heart tissue. And it was a weird source. Like, I didn't completely trust it, and I wonder if
something's up with your heart.
Yeah, I wonder, like, my kidneys ache, there's an infection in my blood, it's like my heart's under more strain just because my body's fighting. So, like, it didn't want me to eat because that takes energy to digest.
Yeah. So how have you been taking care of yourself? What's been effective? When we talked before, you mentioned tea tree oil and...
Yeah, I've also had a bath every day. And I think when you have a chill, it's usually your body sets your like temperature regulation lower so it can raise your body temperature. It basically says like, I'll make you feel cold so that I can actually raise your body temperature. So I took a lot of baths, and I would feel a lot better for an hour or two after a bath, because I think it was raising my body temperature and taking that burden off my body would be a guess. I have no idea if that's scientific, but and yeah, I've also just been like putting a drop of tea tree in each nostril quite a lot. Again, I don't know if that works, but it was because of the tightness, and I think tea tree is antibacterial, and I wondered if breathing tea tree in would just help not get an infection in my lungs.
Yeah, because that's a threat with the way that the virus operates, that the walls of your lungs are actually being damaged by your immune system, so you can become infected with the bacteria at that point.
Yeah, the virus infects lung tissue, and once the cell's infected, what your body does is come along and kill the cell, as well as fighting virus that gets out and goes somewhere else. It specifically kills those cells which are making it, and that's how you get pneumonia. Like, you then get a secondary infection at the sites of those dead cells. Thought it was worth a go.
Yeah. So you're not really over this entirely, right? You're feeling better the last couple of days, but
yeah, I felt a bit worse this morning, and I usually have a few good hours in me a day. And like right now I feel that burning in my heart and like a tightness in my like across the top of my chest. And it's unpleasant to walk around. Like my kidneys just ache more, and my heart thumps. And more.
And so like that symptom set, like you've been sick, what you said, with colds and things, like that sounds unusual. Like I don't remember feeling that way.
A huge difference for me is like I always get so blocked up in my head, and coronavirus just doesn't infect the sinuses. And
so you're not congested?
Not at all. Yeah.
And you're one of the 24 out of 25 with no runny nose?
Yeah. And I also felt some nausea during this, which is a coronavirus symptom. And one day I felt like I was going to have diarrhea. I didn't, because I haven't eaten anything, but I had that like feeling in my gut,
Yeah.
which is also a coronavirus symptom, or I should say, actual diarrhea is. Yeah.
Okay. And so, but on the timeline again, how many days has it been since you started having symptoms again?
So let me just check my calendar. I think, yeah, definitely Wednesday the 4th in the evening. I had like early evening. I had this throaty, like a tickle, a dry tickle in my throat, which made me want to cough. And only ever so slight. Like I probably only coughed about 30 times in this whole thing.
Okay.
I had that like tickle.
And so that's been 13 days till now. When would you say the peak of it was when you felt?
Saturday morning, which is the 14th. And then Saturday night, I was aware that, it's the first time I felt any hunger through that really bad period. And I ate
a good sign, right?
Yeah.
So that was day 11, and you're at day 13 now. So it seems like it peaked.
Yeah, and the thing I've been really happy about is not getting a phlegmy cough, basically, because I've heard people like their lungs get phlegmy, they have a secondary infection, and that's often a way they deteriorate.
So
that's
phlegm,
pneumonia.
I see. So phlegm is more of a sign that you've gotten a secondary infection.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And seems like there's a few different ways it can show up, like some variation in symptoms.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of people, like, it's not a very consistent disease. There's these like different symptoms, but the mixture is quite unusual and different between people. But in the house I was talking about, I think there's about 10 people in the house. I'm not there, so I don't know exactly, but it sounded like one person got no symptoms, several of them got a dry cough, and then three felt more sick. One was this guy who was the first to get it, who had, he had a cough, but he also said he had a runny nose. And the other two had like aches and chills, I think. Yeah, and just tiredness.
So that was like 50% with a dry cough. You've got 10 people, so it breaks up into percentages nicely. We've got
it's about 80% had a dry cough.
Okay. So the dry cough, yeah.
Yeah, and 20 actually, and what I've heard is 20% have no symptoms. There's this figure of 80% have a mild disease going around, and I actually looked into that, and it's what the doctors call mild, but you can have full-on pneumonia and they still call it mild. So it's actually everything in that 80% is everyone from nothing to pneumonia that they don't want to hospitalize. And people get pneumonia with flu, like that infection in your lungs is technically pneumonia. And at some point it becomes bad enough that you need some antibiotics or help at the hospital, but you don't always.
So you said 20% don't have symptoms. How would you know that you have it then?
You don't, apart from testing.
And so like in the testing, the places where they've had widespread testing, because you're in Seattle and we've had a shortage of tests in the States. So
yeah, I think as far as I know, the US still have quite a few tests, and they're saving them for people who are severely ill, who have been in contact with somebody else that's confirmed as a case. And I think a couple of days ago, the CDC relaxed that, but they don't have the tests. Like, doctors are still doing that because the number of tests hasn't increased yet, or not sufficiently. But in other places, yeah, they've just detected it in people where those people have had no symptoms.
Let me see. Could you talk a little bit about the social aspect? you mentioned your roommates, and you're in Seattle, which is kind of the first city facing this in the US. Like how has it been seeing it coming and watching other people's responses?
It's been disheartening. um, yeah. Well, I guess I feel it was obvious where this was going. Like, if you look at the data, it's just obvious. And the countries that have managed to control it had social distancing, widespread testing, widespread contact tracing. Some were using cell phone data to do contact testing, contact tracing.
Taiwan did that? Is that?
Yeah. And yeah, Taiwan's been incredibly successful. And they're saying like they learned all these things when they had the SARS outbreak, so they were better prepared. In South Korea, it took like their cases exploded initially, but they got it under control by social distancing, widespread testing. The US has done like a few days ago, it got to about 10,000 tests, and South Korea is doing 10 to 20,000 per day. And yeah, those measures seem to have got it under control. And here in Seattle, there's a lot of social distancing now, which will have an effect for sure. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And I stayed inside as soon as I knew I had it, and even before that, I was really careful and not careful enough. And yeah, I think I transmitted it on Wednesday. I walked in the park with a friend, and yeah, I hugged her when we met. I made sure we didn't touch skin, and she got sick 3 days after me. So I got sick 3 days after contact with the hound. 3 days after me.
Yeah. So they say like if you infect if everybody infects 2 people, then that's the minimum for it to have this viral explosion, right? So maybe if you only infected 1, you're just
keeping it going,
linear,
not making it worse. It would have been nice not to infect anyone.
Yeah, because that's the goal. And so like one other quality of this is that it has a period of asymptomatic where you are contagious is what I've heard.
Yeah, and and before I got it, I was doing social distancing, and actually the only reason I went to the house was like I knew this one guy was sick, and I was like, well, I'm already distancing myself, so I'm not going to pass it on, and it's like my risk. I'll get it and have to stay at home. But yeah, I let that one person slip.
Yeah, it only takes one, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in San Francisco, and they just locked down the city. They said shelter in place. We're still kind of figuring out what that means, but it sounds like they've closed all of the businesses, only essential functions starting midnight tonight. So everybody has half a day to
Get some food.
Yeah, figure things out. But I imagine that'll be, be interesting. I want to say a wake-up call, like people that maybe aren't taking it seriously, or maybe they'll see the city is overreacting now.
Yeah. Go.
So has Seattle's healthcare system been under strain?
Yeah, I've just last night I started to hear reports of it being strained now. Like it's experiencing strain, and and we're in social distancing. So the problem is it takes you about 30 days to die. So when you implement a strategy, you have 30 more days before that actually affects the number of people being admitted to hospital. So it'll continue to climb for 30 days because all of those people that are dying 30 days later have already been infected today. And it just takes some time to like clear them through the system.
Right. And so the people that are needing the most intense care are the ones that are needing intubation or oxygen, basically, right? To like assisted breathing.
Yeah.
And there's only so much of that. So if the number of people that need that exceeds the amount of service that the hospitals are able to provide, then the death rate goes up.
Yeah, which is what we're seeing in Iran and Italy.
Yeah. So that's the crucial point that we're trying to avoid, is to just either slow down how many people get it.
Yeah.
I
There were
think
reports.
this thing, what you're saying about the bacterial infection. So like once you have it, avoiding a bacterial infection, right? Because you're not just like, oh, hands up, like don't give it to me, but you're still kind of on the watch for that bacteria, because that would be the thing that would probably lead to the complications, pneumonia.
Yeah. There's that, and there's a severe immune response as well, which is which often happens with viral infections. Like your body kind of overreacts, and the overreaction can kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah, which seemed to be how people died of Spanish flu. Actually, they died very quickly of that overreaction, and then some died later from exhaustion or other complications.
And this one is, people die, they basically suffocate. Is that?
Like drown in their lungs, kind of.
Yeah.
Basically, all of your alveoli get blocked with phlegm, sputum, and you can't take oxygen in. Yeah, and there's 80% that have a mild illness, 20% who need hospitalization. This is like overall. So 20% need hospitalization, 15% need additional oxygen, and 7% need to be on an ICU ventilator. And that basically means like when hospitals are overwhelmed, there's 15% which could, in theory, die, which will probably be like localized to particular hospitals or regions. It'll send the death rate up. Yeah. And all of these percentages, like it depends on your demographics as well.
Right. Yeah, we kind of throw around percentages, but it's like a range or a way to estimate things, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, the point of interviewing you is just kind of have like a, I don't know, just like your story about the progression.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't know, anything that you want to say to people? Like, what do you do? What do you do with that?
I think actually I'd like to say like it's really rough. Like it was unpleasant. And I'll feel terrible tonight. Like this is just the good period of my day.
And you're 34-year-old healthy male, right? Like you're one of the people that supposedly shouldn't be worried.
Yeah. And like there was a couple of moments in it where I was like, oh, I feel terrible. I wonder if this is what kills me. And yeah, what do you do with that? I'm happy we're in social distancing. I'd really like this to change things. Like it's horrific. There's going to be people dying. That's terrible. And I'd like us to just like reorganize life a bit, like in a lasting way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we were talking before, there's, we've been talking about this or seeing data about this since January, and depending on what you're tuned into, a lot of people knew that this was coming. Like you said, you knew this was coming. I've been onto it since maybe mid late January, like, oh, whoa, I think this is going to happen. And was able to get a good enough read on the variables, asymptomatic transfer, and all of these things. Was like, oh, it seems like this is going to really spread. And then we were right about it. And I see a lot of people doing this thing where they say like, oh, the hysteria, the panic. And I didn't feel hysterical or panicked when I realized that it was real and that it was prudent to take action. But I think that there's this projection that people have that if you are taking this thing seriously, that you must be hysterical or panicking. And that that reaction right there is kind of the pointer into where I would like people to look closer uh, at the biases. You know, everybody has biases. I have biases, but this thing called normalcy bias, where you want things to be the same, and so you look for evidence that things aren't going to change. And that kind of makes sense because things usually don't change. But something comes along like this comes along, and so many people are surprised, waylaid by it, and there's a social cost to that. So maybe this will like have people be like, oh, I don't know everything. You know, I need to be not only skeptical but discerning. Because like a lot of people are good at being skeptical, um,
Yeah.
or some people might be naive, but I think in the middle is discernment, where you're able to look at all of the noise and all of the misinformation and still discern the signal and respond to it intelligently. And maybe more people will be able to do that after this.
Yeah, I'd really like that. I think one thing that's happening is there's all this information, all a little bit different. Already, no one trusts what they're being told, and then the reaction is like nothing is true,
Right.
which is not true.
Yeah.
And the great thing about data is we can use it to make predictions. And then if those predictions are a place you don't want to go, you can figure out something to do to avoid it. And maybe some of the panic was people were hearing this was bad and not seeing an appropriate governmental response, which made them feel unsafe or something.
Yeah.
Also, yeah.
And I think there are people, we talked about this before, people who do have a hyped up reaction early, you know, like alarmists, but they kind of serve as alarms for the larger collective because they start saying, like, hey, this is a thing. And then, you know, there's people who are listening and kind of maybe will like look with discernment. And then if they're like, oh, well, yeah, this is a thing, you know, like not for the reasons you said, but it's a thing, you know, and then this coronavirus experience has permeated so many layers of skepticism, where there are people who were at one point being like, this is a waste of time, like this is nonsensical, I can't believe that this is happening again, it's just like the flu. And then 2 weeks later they're like, whoa, I was mistaken. And to see that, you know, like the humility required to have that happen, and the way that people can handle that with grace and then start having an appropriate response, and then to not have like this I told you so response and be, you know, it's just this natural progression. People have to wake up to it, and we all have different levels that need to be met, and we're all tapping into different sources, but this one needs to permeate. And America's, like, how many people die in America is going to be determined by our ability to do that. We don't have a communist government to like shut us down with drones and and whatnot.
Yeah, it's like our responsibility, or at least partly.
Yeah, so it's an interesting year. We'll kind of see how it washes out. I feel like I'm learning a lot, and there's a lot of like good connection coming out of it. Like, I don't know, it's like online stuff. People who are out isolating, getting in like Zoom calls and things like this and putting that out there. So hopefully it's in the end, a positive bonding experience for us.
Yeah, I hope so.
Maybe no consolation for
it's
your.
nice to see. China the other day sent a bunch of doctors and 1,000 ventilators to Italy, which was like they have it under control. They have them to spare. It was nice to see.
Yeah, that's great. So cool. Let's wrap that up there. Thanks for being interviewed, Mr. Holden, coronavirus survivor in Seattle. And we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks. I should just say none of us got tested.
Yeah, and it may not even be coronavirus, but we're pretty sure.
100% consistent symptoms, but,
Right.
but no tests.
But no testing. So later, when we look back at this, we can deny anything even happened because where's the data?
Data. No data.
No data. None of this is scientific.
Just a load of graves. We don't know what they died of.
No. Okay, we'll end there.
Cheers.